Okay, the motor. The problem you have with a motor, besides being completely stuck and not moving at all, is they tend to run slow, especially when they're first turned on. And that's because the viscosity of the oil has changed with time and you want to relubricate it. Before you take this apart, what I like to do is it's good practice to get everything back in where it was. In other words, this will fit either way, but I like to put it where it was before so that the top cap matches where the bottom cap was as far as the direction, either left or right, whichever way it was, because they're not marked. But I make a little scratch mark on on here, on everything that was on the long. You'll notice this is a long spacer here and no spacer here where it came off the motor mount. So I mark the spacer, I scratch it, scratch the spacer, scratch this thing, and even scratch a little mark in the motor and scratch the bottom of the cap here. That way you're sure that everything goes back where it came from. Then you take your 1/4-inch nut driver again and you loosen this up here, which is easy. All right, loosen that up. Whoops. And loosen this side here up. Again, working one-handed. There we go. Now, when the motor comes out, or when the rotor comes out, or the armature. Okay, come on out. There we go. And you take the spacer out, and you take out the nut on the other side. There we go. Then you can pull this part out of here. Now what you want to do is clean it up real good. I use Ronson lighter fluid to clean these with. You can use whatever works. You can use some mild steel wool to clean all that old black stuff off there. And then pull this backwards like that. There's a little keeper here that keeps this thing from being pulled off. If you pull this keeper off, you won't be able to put it back on. Not the end of the world, it's not needed. But if you take this off, to take this all the way off, you're not going to be able to put this on. These are a one-time thing, and once they're pressed on, once you take them off, you can't put them back on. I tend to take them off and toss them because they're not needed. And anyway, what is needed, there is a cardboard little spacer under there on the shaft to keep the armature from riding up too tight and touching the motor. You want to make sure that's there. When you reassemble the motors, it's important. Now notice I haven't put any oil in this. It's just for sake of argument to show you. When you put this back into the bottom cap, you've cleaned it with a Q-tip and some lighter fluid, and this is all back together again and all that gobbledygook. And you put the washers back on. The screws go back through like that. You put the nuts back on. As you tighten very easily so that it's almost just finger tight, and then hold the motor in your hand and wrap the frame of the motor several times on all ends. That helps seat the bearing, because the bearing is a movable part. I'm going to show you this, the bottom part. This inner hole, and you see the little brass clips that hold the inner hole? That inner part can move. And when you take it apart, if you disturb that and get it off to one side, it will tend to drag the motor down. So that tapping the motor as you put it back together will make sure that everything works good. When you reassemble the motor, give the shaft a spin, and it should easily and freely spin and continue to spin. In other words, this is not back together, but for the sake of argument, let's say it is. It should be very free to move, and it shouldn't, when you give it a twist, it should go and it should feel like it's very, very free moving. It shouldn't stop right away, and it shouldn't feel like there's any resistance to it. And then you'll be all set, and that's the motor.